there's a better way to do all of that. But yes, hopefully you didn't log in to learn about handbags, because we're talking about taxes and actually how the taxes fill your handbag. So well, we should say how they minimize the money and cash that can fill them. And that's what we're talking about today. Just a little bit about me and my background. I'm a financial advisor and a co-founder of V Financial Partners. The picture of our barn there in Aurora, Ohio. The doors are open and we are meeting with people socially distanced when comfortable in that open space. You know, but all of this started, gosh, working on 11 years ago. I'm a healthcare person by background. I am a physical therapist and worked in that industry for 17, almost 18 years, and was a vice president of operations when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I said, I'll quit this and be your champion. And we rushed to Cleveland, Ohio. And that's a little bit of the background. I won't go into too much detail other than to say, as a healthcare person, I come from a caring perspective. I'm not, if you talk to my assistant, she'd tell you I'm a terrible salesperson. But I like to educate and I like to teach people all the things I never learned from advisors. And I think that matters. You know, in my opinion, it just gives you a little bit different information. Should mention, we do have a location also in Independence. Now, when I was talking a little bit there about my background, one thing I'm not an accountant, CPA, or tax legal professional. So while we're going to talk about taxes a little bit today, we are, I guess I would say, if you need to have, you know, financial advice related to your specific taxes, that's where you work with your team of advisors who would be your financial advisors and tax professionals. But let's move on to sort of the objectives of today. Woo, get ready, ladies. We're talking about number one, understanding the three basic areas of income and investment taxation to feel comfortable or more comfortable maybe with lingo. My personal experience with financial advisors, I was intimidated. I didn't understand the details, and they didn't register. So we're going to work today so that maybe even 10% better, that you'll feel better about the lingo. And then I'd like you to also consider options for decreasing your pre-tax IRA. I should have said really pre-tax IRA savings, actually. I think many of us, anybody who's definitely 50 or above, we saved everything in 401ks and IRAs, and we'll talk about that in this presentation. Now, I add to the presentation just that this is the educational objectives. I mean, this is taxes. Whoa, did my screen change for you guys? It changed on mine. So these are educational, but we're gonna try to make them fun, if at all possible. You guys, my presentation's gone. Do you see it? I apologize.
Screen went black. Oh, no, it's gone.
All right, that's not good. Let's get back to it. I have no idea why. We'll try again. So let's get in it. All right.
Okay.
Try that again.
Back up.
Moving along. I'm gonna click through
No.
here.
Is that the next slide?
Pardon me?
What we see is a potential conspiracy of obvious subliminal communication.
Or obvious. Okay. All right. So I'll go back. Here's the educational objective.
Yes.
I would like my presentations to be super inspiring and motivational, but I'd like you all to consider that we're talking about taxes. So taxes are kind of everywhere, and my presentation is about investment and income tax per se. So this is where we are. When I was working, you know, through this, I found sort of what I thought was a conspiracy or subliminal communication. This is just to try to keep this lighthearted. Have you ever heard or considered about the IRS, and you take out that space there? It equals theirs. Did you ever see that? Think of it. This is a kind of a funny, my opinion, kind of a funny way to see. Now, my question to you, Yolanda, are you guys able to see my whole screen, or are you just seeing part of it and is part of it covered up with the gallery? Oh, you're quiet.
This is your whole screen.
You see my whole screen? Good. So you can see the whole cartoon that says, like the sign
Yes.
says, it's all theirs. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Had anybody seen that before? I hadn't. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy that the IRS would be about it being all theirs. So there's tons of taxes out there. We're talking about income tax. And if you're working with guys, you're talking about buckets. And this is where we're going to be different today. Today, we're talking about handbags. This is where we're going to have the Chanel bag in the after-tax non-qualified. A Prada bag under pre-tax tax deferred, and that's changed from other presentations. And then an Hermes bag, which is the most expensive bag that's ever been sold for over $1 million, but it is tax-free on my screen, so I kind of like that. You know, one of the slides that was missing was a little bit more about tax in general. When you think about it, we have tax on everything. We have tax on property tax, sales tax. We have tax on excise, corporate tax. There's hotel tax. I mean, there's tax on so many different areas, but again, we're looking specifically about how it affects our money and our income and what we keep in the pocketbook, okay? Yolanda and I really focus on this quote here: by 2030, women will control 2/3 of our nation's wealth. Why is that important? Because some of us, before I worked in this industry 10 years ago, I paid attention to money, but I didn't learn it. I had advisors that I had paid a lot of money for many years, and the lingo overwhelmed me. I was intimidated, so I wasn't on top of my game. Now I work in it every day and I'm on it a little bit more. I think what's important in this presentation today is that understanding and mitigating taxes is going to leave more of those dollars for us to spend. So if you like saving it, that's great. But I think as females and women who do grocery shopping and taking care of families, and as I overheard buying the uniforms, we understand the money that goes out to take care of our families. So if there's a way to keep more of it, you know, in our bank accounts, that's a good thing. So moving along here. The first bag we're going to be talking about was that Chanel bag. That's the 1099 now. If you don't know, a 1099 is what you receive. Don't know if you do your taxes. You just take all the papers to an accountant or a spouse. The 1099 now is like you are receiving income tax. You're paying it straight away. So that's your money that goes from your job. Obviously, you pay tax on it. It's taxed now. If you have money in the bank, a savings account, if you ever received a 1099 interest for the 64 cents you received from your bank, that would be taxable money. That was the interest they paid on your bank account, 64 cents. That's your 1099 now. The same thing is true with investment accounts, real estate, business income. We'll get into this a little bit more later. We're going to have tax-free income, put a big sunshine on there because that's tax-free. They're not getting one, well, not getting one penny. I should say these are the dollars in a Roth IRA that grows tax deferred, but it's coming from the Chanel bag. You take it from your Chanel bag and you invest in a Roth IRA. That Roth IRA is going to grow tax deferred, meaning there's no capital gains. We'll talk again more on those details later. But when you take it out, it's tax-free. And when we're all looking for retirement, that's any money we can get free, or almost anything free, is a good thing. You know, this includes 529 plans, which are savings plans for children, and cash value life insurance. You know, as Yolanda knows, my middle bag was a very cute pink bag before, and that was also on the materials that she used for marketing. I'm feeling more and more different about the tax-deferred bag. That is the Prada bag. And I put in there that the devil wears Prada, because these are the dollars that are going to be taxed later. Like, we don't know what they're going to be. It's our 401k, traditional IRA, it's annuities and other deferred compensation. Of course, as you can tell, we're talking handbags, sort of in a cartoon look. So I'm not 150,000% comprehensive in these lists, but I want you to be able to wrap your head around what it is. I know you're going to remember that the devil wears Prada. The Prada bag is the taxable bag, and we don't like taxes. No offense to anybody who works for the IRS or, I don't know, deals with taxes. So that's sort of the intro to where we're headed here. So let's start here with our Chanel bag again, just more specifically. Have y'all heard of, like, when people say, is that your non-qualified account? I mean, what's non-qualified mean? That's your after-tax money. That's the easiest way to kind of think about it. Non-qualified means it doesn't get any special tax treatment. It is not qualified for special tax treatment, meaning it's not growing tax deferred. You're not going to be able to get it out tax-free. It's going to be taxed, so it gets no special tax treatment. So let's take a pause on that. Try to let it sink in. Non-qualified money means money you either already paid tax on or you're going to probably pay tax in the future if it grows. But that's the different part. The money that we get is gain. Okay, so some people know about CDs. They've never really been a big hit in my world. I mean, I worked with a 70-some-year-old who was accustomed to 9% on a CD many, many years ago. So she'd put 100 grand in the CD. She'd go every year and get her $9,000. It was a sweet system. She's waiting for it to bounce back to that. I'm like, I'm really sorry, miss. I think you may never see that. You know, you'd die waiting. So, but that's capital gain. So every year she received $9,000. She only paid tax on the $9,000. Okay, so it's kind of nice. It's better than paying it 100% like on our income tax. So that's a capital gains tax. Since 1922, you know, capital gains taxation has been as low as 12% and as high as 35%. When I was talking to somebody about this recently, they go, well, gosh, that spans as much as I pay in income tax. But remember, you know, if you made $5,000 in income and you're in a 20% tax bracket, you bring home like 100% of that 5,000 is taxed. Actually, it's, you know, this is where we're not going to get into accounting. It's a banded, striated level. But let's say you paid 20% tax. You're paying it on the whole 5,000 and then you yield 4,000. So capital gains, again, the tax rate can be smaller, but ultimately it's only on the gain that you've seen. Now, if anybody at the end says, hey, Erin, what was the, you know, capital gain rate in a specific year, or what is it? Even today, this goes to 2015, we're really at the 20%. Sometimes it's 15 or 20. It depends on how much income you make. But again, all based on income, how much we will be taxed. And this is only on the money you've gained in a savings account, in an investment, on if you sell a house. But this is important. Let's say you're not selling your house, but you have to sell your parents' house. You know, you've inherited it. Capital gains you won't have a capital gains tax in that case. You know, but all these things are worth considering because taxes matter. They limit how much we will actually receive of money that we've either invested, saved, so on and so forth. I'm going right into the Devil Wears Prada bag next, okay? This is tax deferred money. And again, it was just a cute pink bag before this year. This is money that's taxed later. You know, if we were in a together environment, I'd be asking questions and exchanging with all of you. But, you know, it was the 1980s when 401ks really became a thing. 1980. Before 1980, the top tax rate was 75%. It dropped down to 50% in the 80s. And this is the time when Reagan was president and he popularized the 401k. We stopped seeing pensions as frequently, and everything fell on to the workers to save their money for retirement. So these 401ks, your money goes in pre-tax. This is like a great thing, at least from the time it began till now, because you're getting a tax deduction on the front end. In the 80s, if you were to retire, there were like 15 different tax brackets. So when you retired, you received a little less income, you went down 2 or 3 brackets. Now there's only 6. So if there's only 6 tax brackets, if you don't, you know, you get into it, you get a little less income, you go down 0. You pay the same level of taxation on less money. So again, a lot has changed. You know, things change over time, but this is tax deferred money, and we'll get into it a little more specifically. This is your pre-tax savings and investments. If you move money from a 401k or a 403b, you roll it over, it becomes a traditional IRA. IRA, I usually say this a lot. I'm going to say that there's business a whole lot more after this presentation, but an IRA is only a few letters from the IRS. An IRA is tracked to your social security number. Like you couldn't commingle, you know, a spouse's IRA with yours and blend them together, because they are being tracked by the IRS, because no matter where it goes, they will receive tax. Whether you know, leave it to your children will be taxed. Wherever it goes, It's tracked. And I don't mean to sound like all woo, voodoo hoodoo, but that's what a 401k becomes, is your IRA. Annuities as well are taxed like these things. But why do we care? Why is Erin making it such a bad deal? Got to ask the question, you know, how often could our tax rates change? We'll get to that. What specifically drives up taxes? And why should we specifically be revisiting the Prada bag as a bad bag? All right, so how often can it change? I think this is the best, you know, this quote: the only difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets. Taxes can change with every presidential election. They can change with who's in office. So for me, I'm in my 50s, you know, I could see 4 more changes in taxes. I mean, and it could change every year. It could change within a presidency. But if typically there's a different agenda with different people in office, many people don't realize we had one of the largest tax hikes we've seen under this current administration at the beginning of 2020. Huge tax hike. It didn't happen to our income tax, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. So taxes change with, you know, politics, basically. So we don't control it. And I just have to say, like, let's say I bought a house today and somebody said, I'll give you a great interest rate on it, but I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be. It might change 4 separate times, but when you retire, I'll tell you what the actual amount will be. We don't know what our future taxation will be. So what drives up taxes? That's the next part. Taxes pay for programs, federal programs like Medicare, Social Security, those type of federal programs, our national defense. And taxes have and play a role in our debt, even just the interest. So I think it's important just to remind everybody our current national debt, and this was as of March, the end of March, late March, was $26 trillion. Some calculators don't even give you enough spaces for the trillions. Some do, though, most do. But here's another way to think about this. If interest rates being low as they are, our national debt is only going to be an interest rate of 2%. The interest owed annually on the national debt is I can't even see it the way my screen is set up, but $520 billion. So think about that. That's then every single year, in addition to the debt itself, we are dealing with $520 billion of interest. So when you think about a credit card and they tell you how long it would take you to pay it off, if you pay the minimum payment, how do we even cover just the debt alone? You know, it's an issue. And I think it's something that we all have to consider, but there's more. And that goes into the Secure Act 2020. I mentioned that previously, that right at the beginning of the year in January, this was passed. It was long before we knew the crazy world we would be in today. This tax is on IRA dollars that are passed to our children, or on to any beneficiaries, basically. Prior to the Secure Act, there was you could take a stretch IRA. So let's say Yolanda loves me and leaves me, I'm just joking, but you know, an IRA that would have, prior to 2020, I could have taken it over my lifespan. Any money I took out of it would be taxed. If I didn't want to take any out, there would be a minimum distribution that would be taxed. I might even pass that money on, you know, to somebody else, and then they receive it as an inherited IRA, and then they could keep stretching those taxes out instead. Now it all has to be taken out in a 10-year period. So in 10 years, that money has to be fully distributed. So now those of us who were affected by the 80s and saved so much, the majority of what we've saved is pre-tax money. The likelihood that we will leave that behind is significant. So now the IRS is going to get more money on the money that we haven't already paid tax on it, but there's going to be more that they receive because of this. Typically when IRA money passes to a child, so imagine, you know, late 70s, early 80s individual who's passing money on, it's IRA money, and it goes to their children. Their children are in their late 50s, early 60s. They're in their highest income earning years, most likely. So the tax they'll pay on the money they receive from an IRA is going to be even more than it ever would have been if you spent it all in retirement. So perhaps that's a strategy. Either way, it's important to say, if you haven't done so already, you should consider working with your advisors to minimize your tax exposure in retirement. In retirement, or the tax exposure to the people with whom might receive your legacy. And I hope you all notice I said advisors. You know, when I started in this business, I didn't even know what probate was. I had had financial advisors in my life, and I was just beginning in this career, and my mother died suddenly. She had been quite well. If we had gotten certain paper signed, we probably, I think a probate attorney would have certainly said, you know, transfer on death and you will be fine here. But I was not taught that. My financial advisors didn't mention it, but had they mentioned it, either it wouldn't have registered. What I'm saying to all of you, having advisors, so having a financial advisor who may have you work with a probate attorney, or you have attorneys, and having them all work together, CPAs, advisors, that is an important piece. And we're all aware of these exact things. So tax exposures. What can you do about the tax exposure you have today? Open a Roth IRA. We'll talk about that when we get to the Sunny Hermes or Hermes bag, however you say that. Consider Roth conversion. You can add to the Roth portion of a 401k or 403b if that's an option. And I encourage everybody to learn about, you know, cash value life insurance and how that may or may not fit into your overall plan. It's another vehicle, and a good one when applied appropriately, that can make a difference. Let's go on to the Sunny bag. All right, the Sunny bag, I had to actually look it up, the Hermes, how you say that. You know, this money is the tax-free income essential in a retirement plan. Obviously like I mentioned before, Roth IRA, Roth conversion, cash value life insurance, you know, and also in the middle of that sunny picture there is the 529 plans. That's, you know, tax money that can be invested and grow tax deferred and come out tax-free. That's for children's insurance. And it doesn't have to be in children. It could be anyone in your family. 529 plans obviously are good for educational expenses that may be set up for your children. But let's say your children get a full academic or athletic scholarship. You could use the $529 as tax-free money to pay for classes you would take for your career, continuing education. So I think that's surprising. It can actually transfer around within one family. But again, typically it needs to be spent on education and not handbags, just in case you didn't know that. So specific about the Roth, I thought it's worth mentioning that they have income limitations. So anybody who's a single person who wants to go out and start a Roth IRA, if they make more than $137,000 a year, you can't do it. Same thing if you're part of a married couple that makes more than a household income of more than $203,000, you too cannot open a Roth IRA. So I've had people of that nature say to me, Erin, there's nothing I can do, but yet there is. You can convert a portion of your 401k or 403b into a Roth. What does that mean? That means you pay the income tax on the amount you converted in the year you do it. But then those dollars will grow tax deferred and you'll take them out tax free. And whether we know taxes and what they'll be in 15, 20 years or not, what we do know is not paying tax on these dollars will make a difference to lower your overall tax rate. You know, any advisor could probably show you how that's a worthwhile consideration, only if you can pay the tax. I mean, that can be really expensive. But think about this. Anybody you know, who maybe has made less money, most everyone has been impacted in one way or another, but if you've made less money in 2020 due to COVID, you could, do a Roth conversion and pay the same income tax you were accustomed to. I mean, you'd want to work with both a financial advisor and a tax consultant or a CPA, but ultimately it's a consideration. If you made less money converting the same amount, let's say you make $10,000 less and you convert 10,000, it's not like your taxes are going to be driven up higher than you could imagine by doing so. So I really think that's a worthwhile, recommendation, because I'm telling you, I don't know. Anyway, to review, we have here the handbags, all right? We had the first one, that is the non-qualified Chanel bag. That's the 1099 now. That's your savings accounts, investments accounts, business income, real estate. We have the Prada bag that is now the less good bag, in my opinion. It's your 401k, traditional IRA. It's things that you put away pre-tax that has yet to be taxed and will be taxed when you take it out. And then the tax-free bag, we like that one. And that's can be accomplished, more of it, with Roth IRAs, Roth conversions. That does include the children's or educational plans that grows tax-free, and you can get it out tax-free, and cash value life insurance. You know, all this, I've kind of been beating up the tax thing. I do need to include and say the taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society. It does pay for our roads and things, you know, the National Guard and things that are so very important. So I don't want to minimize that. But I think what's essential is that we keep as much as we can of our hard saved money, our retirement savings, keep it in our pockets. Have, you know, our big focus in business is how to get people the most amount of their money. Like, and the way to get the most amount of your money is to do your best to not have to pay as much in tax. I'll include two more quick quotes. You know, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. So I think taxes are a necessary evil, but ultimately the best way to predict the future is to create it. And there's things you and we all can do to make that a little bit better. I say save on the taxes and give to good charities, but that's my bend, you know, or give to anyone and everyone in need. And so if we could do a little bit more of that and help out one another, I think our world would be a better place. But that's, again, sort of my editorial comments. From there, I'm done, and I want to know if anyone has questions.